Delaney Buffett,
How
you
are
just
you?
graduated from Palm Beach Day, and take us from there. Where are you headed? And take us up to the present.
Okay. I will preface this by saying my memory for my age is bad, so I'm going to remember this the best that I can. But when I left,
Don't worry
um,
about that.
when
Join
I
the
left,
club.
yeah, I left Palm Beach Day School, and I went to the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey.
Right.
And I went with a few Palm Beach Day School alum as well. Um, Willie Meyer, Stephanie Barnhart, Christian Rodriguez, and Katie Cummings. So we all went together, and I was at Lawrenceville for 4 years total. I went as a new freshman, and I lived in the dorm, and that was an interesting experience. And I basically was obviously there for 4 years, and I met a bunch of great people, some of my best friends. I would say that it was super challenging. I took a bunch of interesting courses, and there are amazing teachers there as well, like the day school. So I was fortunate with that. And I played volleyball there. I was on varsity volleyball from the time I was a freshman until a senior. So that was my favorite sport. But then we also, there were house sports and different sort of extracurriculars there. So I took part in those. And I remained very close with Katie Cummings throughout the entire process and up to now, which I will get to later. But
Well,
and
I interviewed Katie, 2 weeks ago? Did she tell you?
she told me, yes, she prepared
Okay.
me for this interview. Thankfully, I had some insight from her. So yeah, and so I was there. I played volleyball. I did a lot of community service, which was great. The school has a community service program built in, and there's a lot of local schools in the area. So we all, were lucky enough to do that. And I basically, school is school, and boarding school is an interesting experience. I think there's a lot of kids from the day school who go to boarding school, and I think it prepared me for independence that I might not have had going off to college. You live in a dorm with house parents, and you're with your peers 24/7, eating, playing sports, talking, and it was a unique experience, but a great one. And I think I would send my kids to boarding school, but I don't think everyone would. But yeah, and from there I went. So I was at Lawrenceville my senior year. It's kind of a routine thing at boarding school. So as much as I'd like to say a lot happened, a lot did happen. But as the years go on, it's, you wake up in the morning, you have breakfast, you go to school, you play sports or do community service, you have, check-in hours, you go to bed. And it's like that for 4 years, and everything between has one a lot. But I do think that routine in itself very much prepared me study hall in terms of time management now and in college, because there's no study hall in college, but we had strict no phone hours from 7 o'clock to 11 and lights out. So I graduated from Lawrenceville, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and there I I grappled with what to study. And to be honest, I wish that I had focused a little bit more on English. I've always loved English since I was at the day school and writing. And it's sort of what I do now. But interestingly enough, and my mom always says it's because I was watching a lot of Dexter, the serial killer show on Showtime, chose my major to be criminology, which is the study of the criminal mind and criminal law. And that's what I sort of settled on. And I love psychology, and I loved reading about, how the mind works and behavioral things. And I was really bad at psychology. I'm really bad at multiple choice tests. And so I basically couldn't get above a C on a test in psychology because I just couldn't. I think there's too many options, and I would always doubt myself. And so I was like, okay, I'm not good at this, but this more specific thing I'm super interested in. And my mom was sort of said, if you're really interested in something, you probably will excel in that. And so I decided to do criminology. And while I do nothing with it now, at the time, I learned all about, policing and legal issues, all from there to like why someone becomes a serial killer, which was the most interesting thing to me. And I think many people, which is why true crime stories are so riveting to everyone. And I made a lot of friends. I didn't play sports in college. I wasn't up to par, which is fine. I could have played club, but I loved Philadelphia. I made a ton of friends in Philly. There were a couple of people from my high school that I went to college with as well, who I stayed close with. I was in, like a sorority of sorts, which was fun. And it was a lot of different people that I would never have met otherwise, that were from all parts of the world and different parts of the US. So I was heavily involved with that. And I lived with, 4 girls one year in an off-campus house in West Philadelphia. And then I lived with 8 girls my senior year. And in between my junior year, I was looking to go abroad, and I wanted to go somewhere to a Spanish speaking country, but my Spanish, you had to basically be fluent in Spanish at Penn to go to a Spanish speaking country, which I was not. And so I had English speaking countries that were left as options for me. And I decided to go to Sydney, Australia. And which I am very happy I did. So I love the outdoors, and I love surfing, and I love hiking. And so I got there, and I went to the University of New South Wales, which is in Coogee Beach, which is like a little bit outside of Sydney. And I lived in this apartment that was really close to the beach. And I lived there from July, like 6 months of my junior year, which would have been 2012. And it was amazing, and we got to travel a lot. And I think a lot of people who go abroad during their college years to Europe get to go see all of Europe, but we got to see New Zealand and some of Southeast Asia. And I traveled with my friends, and I got to like go bungee jumping and skydiving. And so I wasn't fully immersed in a Spanish speaking culture like I had hoped, I was very, very excited that I got to go to that side of the world, because I don't know if I'll ever get to spend that much time somewhere like that again. So I spent a lot of time there, and I traveled after to Southeast Asia. I went to Singapore, and then I went to Thailand, and I came back to West Philadelphia, and I finished out my senior year. And I graduated in 2014, and I moved to New York City. And I started a job at HBO as in a marketing assistant. And I worked basically for the social media department, which even for me at that time made I didn't understand how social media could be incorporated into marketing or business. I just knew it as Instagram or like Snapchat at the time. But basically I worked for 3 directors who were in charge of the social media marketing for all of the shows on HBO, like Game of Thrones and Silicon Valley, and I'm trying to think at the time what was on while I was there, but every show possible. And I basically assisted them with all they needed in terms of marketing for those shows. And it was great. I got to work on campaigns for Game of Thrones, but it was funny because I was an assistant, so I had to ship a lot of t-shirts to fans. And there were just random fans who would message on Twitter or on Instagram and say, I want a shirt. And I would send them these items, and I would get back like handwritten thank you notes from Game of Thrones fanatics with like sealed stamp, old timey letters, like inviting me, even though they had no idea who I was. I was just the assistant sending them a t-shirt to like Game of Thrones watch parties, and they would say, come honor us with your presence, and all of this strange stuff. So that was one of my favorite things. And I had to like translate Dothraki, which was the invented language of one of the, characters in the show. So because they would try to talk to me in Dothraki. And so that was the highlight of my experience there, was interacting with the fanatics of the television shows.
Let me ask you this question. Let me interrupt you.
Yes.
Honey. When you graduated from college,
Sure.
did you think at all of getting any kind of a job in law enforcement or anything
Sure.
like that? Okay.
Yeah, I skipped over that part, but after, I think the trajectory for someone with my major was either go to law school and do some sort of criminal law or forensic psychology. And I loved law and I loved reading about it, but I inevitably preferred, and this is not to say that lawyers don't use the creative side of their brain, because I think they have to get pretty creative all the time, but I realized that I wanted to do more creative writing and do more film related things, I think, early on. And those were the internships I held between summers in college, were sort of entertainment based. So I worked at an entertainment agency. I worked, as a production assistant. I did screenplay coverage and sort of wrote about what happened in screenplays for my bosses. So I kind of had my foot in each door and sort of deciding whether I wanted to proceed to go to law school or I wanted to give more entertainment side of things a try. And while I think I would have helped a lot more people if I had gone to law school, I think that inevitably I selfishly chose to sort of proceed a more creative career. And so at the end of college, I decided not to go to law school. And I also decided like my brain doesn't work well with science and math. I'm sorry, this is close as you remember. And that was always a struggle for me. So I didn't really think that I would be able to, and get in, sort of finish and do well in any forensic psychology or sort of science-based courses. So I just sort of wanted to try writing. And while I was at HBO, I didn't go to film school, but I wanted to sort of see what it was like to take a screenwriting course. So while I was there, I had some free time and I would take screenwriting courses, and I sort of really liked that. And it was a great exercise. And I hadn't really written creatively in college that much because my course load and requirements were more, psychology and legal based. So I was writing a lot, but definitely not as creatively as I'd like to. And from there, I started to apply to sort of production based jobs, just assistant jobs to get my foot in the door. And that's how I landed up at HBO in marketing, but it was a start.
Now, what are you in HBO now? What are you?
No, so I was there for about a year and a half. And then I decided that I wanted to try to go work on set. So I got a job as a production assistant, and I worked on an HBO show. It was called Wizard of Lies. It was a TV movie. It was about Bernie Madoff. And that was my first on-set job. So I went and I was a production assistant on that for a couple of months. And it was a rude awakening because my HBO job was challenging, but it was cushy in that the hours were 9 to 5 or 10 to 6. And I was getting up at, for my PA job, I was getting up at 3:45 in the morning and working until 8 p.m. sometimes, it depended. So I was sort of thrown into it. And it's a lot of terminology and things you just have to learn when you're there. So the learning curve is kind of like, it takes a little bit. So, but I loved it. And there wasn't a day I went home that I didn't feel like I used my maximum energy. And it was doing things, when you're entry level, I would get up at 3:45 and you'd go over to 4 and you would, squeeze like 15 oranges to make like 5 glasses of orange juice. And like, that was like, but that to me, I was like, all right, that's a pretty productive morning. And I learned so much. I learned how a set works. I learned sort of the jobs that I would want to try and the jobs I wouldn't want to try. And I worked on that for a couple of months. And then from there, I PA'd on a couple of other things. I PA'd on a movie in New Orleans. So I went and lived in New Orleans for a couple of months, which was great. And I loved it. And it was a new experience because I had been in New York ever since graduating college, and Philly as well. So I was back and forth, and I had never lived anywhere else. I mean, Florida, but New Orleans is a whole new experience. And the people down there were a lot less, they were so friendly. And I think in New York, it's very intense in general in every job. And down there, everyone was kind of a little bit more relaxed, which I appreciated because I'm very high anxiety. So it was nice to be surrounded by people who were a little less so.
It's called the Big Easy, right?
Yeah. So I loved New Orleans and I lived there. And then I had to go to LA and I worked on another set there. And then I ended up working for a producer for about a year in LA. I moved to LA, and then he ended up having to go shoot something back in New Orleans. So I followed him there for a month or so. And after that, I guess that was a couple of years of sort of PAing and working for this guy. I ended up, Katie Cummings and I started to, on the side, write together. And she had gone, which she had gone to Boston College, and she had been trying to act, and she graduated early. And so I had finally graduated. She graduated before me in 3 years. And we just sort of neither of us had gone to film school, as I mentioned, and we both were a little rusty on writing, and we decided to just give it a shot and write something together. And we wrote a web series, and we shot it ourselves with the help of a couple of friends. And we just started to do that for about a year, every month or so, every time we could fit it in with our schedules. And I had been on the side, I kind of, after having done that and been on set, I started to line produce for other people. So I started to freelance line produce other people's web series and other people's, digital content. So if it was a music video or it was something, smaller, I had produced something for Laurel Cummings, Katie's sister. So I started to get work doing that. And then on the side, Katie and I started to write a little bit more seriously. And we've been doing that now for 4 years, I think, or 3, and it's going pretty well. And we do it, I would say, semi-professionally. I don't know what she would qualify it as, or if she qualified it at all, but we've been screenwriting together now for the 4 years, and it's been going well. And it's amazing to actually get to work with your best friend. And it's funny because in meetings, people always ask us how we met. And Katie always gives this story about meeting in chemistry class at the day school in 8th grade. No one knows the context of the day school or anything, so we can't elaborate, but it's always about how we met when we were 10 years old at the day school in chemistry class. And I don't know if she gave you that same story, but that is what everyone always hears. So I've heard that story 1,000 times now. But yeah, so we basically, I still, I line produce here and there, and I direct as well. And I just did, the most recent thing I did was I did like an HIV campaign, and then, but I've also done like someone's short films but it varies. And then Katie and I sort of write when we can, and have a few scripts under our belt at this point. So and I was living in New York from the time I was 22 to 26, kind of back when I had work in New Orleans, I would go there, but I was still in New York. And then 2 years ago, I moved to Los Angeles, and I've been here. It doesn't seem like it because of the pandemic, but I've been here now for 2 years. So I live here, and Katie's still in New York, but so we write remotely with one another. And that's sort of where I am now. I don't know if I skipped over huge chunks or what, but that is sort of where I am at this moment in Los Angeles.
Okay, let me ask you this question now. Let's be specific.
Yes.
At this moment, I don't mean this moment, but now, today, what are you writing? What are you writing? Short story, a screenplay, a novel,
We're writing a feature screenplay right now that we just finished. We're on our probably a very, very last revision, I hope. But we've been revising it for about a year. But we just are writing a screenplay for this production company. And it's very much a farcical comedy. Well, I'll say that before I say what it's about, but it's about a young girl who starts to work for a social media influencer, and she finds out that she's a robot and has to figure out who made her. So it's basically, we like to say, so it doesn't sound so ridiculous, it's a social commentary on how far down the rabbit hole we have gone as a society in terms of technology and social media. But that's what we're writing right now.
Concept. I love it.
Thank you.
Now let me ask you this question.
Yes.
As far as dialogue.
Yeah.
How are you handling, does the robot, do you do anything to make her dialogue robotic in any way? Or how do you handle that, honey?
We have a rule where it's like, in Toy Story when they pull Woody's boot and he says like those different words. So it's like, there's a snake in my boot. Or when you hit like a Furby or a toy, it has just like one line it says. we basically have a rule where we say like, what's the snake in boot? So the robot, we have to have a balance, because basically the audience is aware they're a robot, but the characters can't know that they're robots the first half of like 40 pages of the movie. So we basically, every time we write a line of dialogue, we check if it could also be some weird saying that you could have a toy say, in the lingo of how social media influencers speak. And it's easier the further along we get in the script, because it's more known that she's a robot. So like the further along you get in the script, you start to notice as the audience member, like things that she was repeating and saying already. So like her, as soon as the reveal happens, her mannerisms and dialogue feel a lot more robotic, because it's intentional and that we're having her repeat certain things or say things. But in the beginning, it's a very difficult, delicate balance of getting her to seem human whatsoever. But also influencers have a cadence, and they all speak very similarly, because there's all of this slang that's super in. So they kind of all say the same things and have a similar cadence when they're speaking. So that works in our favor, because It's like we can uniform say, that they say these certain things and match it to what actual influencers say.
Let me ask you this, because I've had how many former students, 15 or 20, who are published writers, anywhere from essays to scientific journals, to fiction, to et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things they always talk to me, and I ask them, and they always say, yes, yes. How do you handle transitions? How do you handle transitions? Because from what I can see in a lot of the writing I see and I'm reading, and I say to myself, that's a poor transition. It doesn't do it. So have you found that to be something, a challenge that you have to be aware of?
Definitely. And I think like, it's interesting when, especially there's like two transition with the dialogue. For me, I think it's a way of having it sound as natural as possible, but also crafting the transitions to work in your favor in terms of moving the story along. But like, yeah, I think also it's huge for me. And if I'm in a sentence and Katie and I are writing and I'm like, that transition makes no sense between what this person said and how this person responds. It feels very forced in our plot mechanics, kind of like we're just having that person say something to say something and it comes out of nowhere. And so I think it's taken us time in terms of the dialogue to maneuver it so it feels as natural as possible, but also helps us move the plot along. But what's great about comedy in terms of like scene transition too, is you can I love ending it on like, he would never say that. This is a bad example. I promise this would never be written in a script, but it would be like ending the scene on like, he would never say that. And then starting on the scene of him saying that. So it's like, that's a great way in terms of screenwriting transition and scene transition that you're lucky with, is like, you can really lean into comedy. But within a scene and dialogue in terms of transitioning, or it's difficult. And I think, Katie and I are both very obsessive, for lack of a better word, in certain ways. So I think that we struggle with transitions a lot of the time and with scene breaks, because we want to make sure it's as like, it makes as much sense as possible. And I think that's probably because we both really want, because I think with screenplays, right, you don't have the beautiful prose that you do with novels. So you can get away with being a lot more simplistic. But I think it's nice to sort of be able to add a little bit of like, take from what you could have to prose to put it in there. And I think we both try to do that with our writing by keeping it as simple as possible. But a lot of the times you can get away with being lazy, I think.
Okay, let me ask you another question. And this, having known writers and having read a lot of writers, and one thing I know about all writers, no matter what they say or what they do, the ego is there. That's why they're writers, because they think that they could put things down on paper. And I've written 2 books. They think that they can put words on paper and people are going to want to read them. And that shows the greatest ego in the world, honey.
Yeah.
Now, when you're working, how do you two work? Decide what goes down, or do you have a method? She does this and you do that, or how do you work that out?
Yeah.
The machinery of working together like that.
So a lot of times I think writing partners in screenwriting, like you will you'll have a script and you'll have the outline and you'll work on a scene and your writing partner work on another scene. You'll come back together and you'll be like, how does this work? Katie and I, we're like of one mind, and that we work on everything at the same time. So the software we use, I'll be typing in a scene and she's watching me type. And sometimes, and I'll jump the gun too. I'll be watching her type. I'll be like, I don't know about that. And then she'll go, let me finish the scene. And then I'll have to be like, you're right. Okay. Because I'll jump. And it's great because we can kind of get it done quickly and we're going back and forth and we're very involved in the process. But a lot of times we have to stop ourselves from watching each other actually typing it out. But I think it's great because I think we keep each other's egos in check. I think we don't, we go back and forth where we're like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then this is the worst thing ever. Right. Every day. Or like, I'll be like, this isn't funny anymore. And she'll say, it's very funny. We've just read it 1,000,000 times. And then she'll say, I hate this. And I'll say, I think it's great. So I think the benefit of having a partner is our egos are kept in check. And, I'll say like, I think this is great. I think this scene is going to, it's going to make the whole movie better. And then we'll get a note and they'll be like, that scene, we don't, from an outside party, that scene makes no sense.
Yeah. And
then we joke that we'll then say to the person, which we always do, you were right, I'm sorry.
You're going to probably, and of course the medium in which you are in, comedy, and the writing you are doing, almost like script writing.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt if you would be able to decide to write a novel together.
I don't know if we could.
I doubt that very much.
No.
What you're doing now lends itself to cooperation in that. It's like a bunch of writers getting ready for a television series, doing
exactly.
Seinfeld. They're all around. Hey, how about this and that? But if you're thinking of getting into doing a novel, or you do it by yourself, I'm sure you're going to find.
Well, I think we both would, and I think what's interesting is like our voice comedically sounds very similar, but our prose are very different. So it would be impossible. And also, like, I think a novel would be so, like, this stuff is personal to us, but like since we come up with the ideas together, but I feel like a novel in many ways is so personal. And I think this is personal, but it's like you said, there's a lot more room for like collaboration and communication. And it's not as, it's so dialogue heavy that, it basically is us putting our dialogue down on a page back and forth. And we read it back and forth a lot too, just to make sure it sounds correct.
Now, honey, as young as you are, you're just a child as far as writing goes, okay? Yeah. Have you thought of, I'm sure you have, and at what stage is this? You probably put it off for now, but when you do write that novel, will it be something in a crime story, do you think? Have you given thought to that? Because there are some great crime stories out there that surpass the crime type fiction, that enter into actually novel writing, make great novels. May I, what was the one, did I have you kids read it in 8th grade? They made a movie out of it. Oh God, I'm 88.
Count of Monte Cristo?
No, not the Monte Cristo. Not that type of crime. Montgomery Clift made the movie. They made a great movie out of it.
Let me see what it is, because this is
where
Montgomery Clift.
Oh God.
Hold on.
Anyway, but this book is called One of the Great American Novels, by the way.
Okay.
Great American.
Is it A Place in the Sun?
A Place in the Sun.
Yes. I don't think we.
What was the name of the book? Was the book A Place in the Sun, or was that the movie based on Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy?
I think so. Yeah.
Tragedy. Theodore Dreiser. Okay, and they made Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift. Okay?
Yes.
So what I'm telling you is there are certain crime novels that transcend the usual crime story, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and I'm sure in your studies in that, you have come across certain things
Yeah.
that, my God, this would be so that you have that in the back there. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I have it. I mean, yeah, and I would love to not only appease my parents, but for myself, be able to apply the knowledge I have of crime that I had in college with my degree and use that in my writing. And, I think I love comedy because I just like to laugh and I love to watch it and I love stand-up comedy. But I think, there's stories I read that are so obscure. There was something called there's this weird story I came across recently called The Goat Castle. And it was about this murder in the South. And it was a true story about these people that lived in this house full of goats. And there was this murder pinned on the wrong person. And it was just very interesting because of the, people involved, which I think is always what makes a great story, is obviously characters. But yeah, I think I would love to, if not a screenplay, be able to write something, even if it's a short story.
I don't have to advise you. I'm not going to tell you to do this, but I'm sure you're doing it. I hope anyway. You do keep a notebook or that in which from time to time you jot down your ideas and
Yeah.
say, okay, all right.
But I also have, I think I always, what's good too with Katie is I'll always, if I have an idea, and sometimes it doesn't always land, but at least it's there in writing forever, I'll text her too and say, you know what I just thought of, would be a really great idea for something. And then she'll be like, yeah, which I know it's not. Or she'll be like, let's think about it. So yeah, I always think it's great to jot down because, you never know what comes up or what you can do in the future.
Honey, if you're going to be a writer, you got to be sure you have a notebook and a pen next to your table.
Oh yeah, I have one, but I don't.
Right.
If I didn't have one, yeah, I'd be very embarrassed. But my handwriting is something.
So here we are. Let's go back and let's do a little reminiscing about. I'm going to ask you a few questions and see if you remember a few things.
Okay.
Okay. You already mentioned the Count of Monte Cristo. That's
Yes.
what we did in 8th grade. How about Julius Caesar, 75 lines? Do you remember memorizing those?
I do remember. I don't think I definitely couldn't do that now. Yes, I do remember memorizing.
How about Cyrano de Bergerac? You remember?
I remember those? That.
You remember?
Yeah.
Those? All right. How about the speech unit? Do you remember your 10-minute final? Do you remember your 10-minute final?
I don't think that I do. I remember my 5-minute speech. I don't know if I remember I don't think I remember my 10-minute final. This is my memory failing me. I know I did one on a Mars bar, frozen popsicle for the 1-minute speech, maybe. Because there was a 1-minute speech, right?
Oh, we did. You did, honey, you did in the speech unit, you did 25 1-minute speeches.
Yeah.
The major speeches, you did a 3-minute, a 5-minute, a 7-minute, an 8-minute, and a 10-minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember those?
Do you guys still do the 100 or nothing quizzes? I remember tests. I remember those.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, gosh. Those were scary.
I'm not going to ask you any grammar questions. So.
But I will say that your class, I feel like you probably hear this from everyone, did very much prepare me grammatically for the rest of my life. And in high school, high school, they said, they were I just felt I felt very prepared in some of those classes grammatically. And Mrs. Close, I felt prepared with math too, but there was nothing that you could have done to save my brain. There was nothing that could have been taught to help me with math.
Okay, let's go and let's do some reminiscing. How about, do you remember any, do you recall much drama? That went
drama?
On? Yeah, and I don't mean the drama classes. I mean the drama among the students,
I do probably, but
huh?
I don't specifically, I do remember some things. I mean, yeah, definitely. Are you referring to specific drama? Because I could probably.
No, but just in general, among the students, different personalities, I'm sure.
Very different personalities. I mean, I think I remember a lot of uniform. I loved having a uniform. I thought that that was the greatest thing ever because I didn't like the having to pick out what I wore to school ever. But I remember there was uniform drama of like people wearing the wrong shoes and their shorts being too their skirts being too short and the wrong, I think I remember that a lot, but I loved having uniform. And that's something I missed when I went away to school and didn't have a dress code of any sorts, was having to pick out things to wear because it's just another thing to worry about as a teenager. But I remember that. I mean, there were a lot of different, I remember there being drama with sports and who didn't make certain teams and who deserved to make certain teams. And I remember Katie and she's not going to like that I brought this up. I remember we got in a fight because we were in Mr. Thompson's class, I think. We debated, I think it was the Gore Bush election, maybe. And I was the Gore side and Katie was the Bush side. And we debated, and I remember it was like a very heated, divided classroom. And I think I think William Lawrenson was on my side, and I remember he was yelling, and someone else was on Katie's side, maybe Christian Rodriguez, I forget, but it was very heated, and I remember that, and we talk about that often.
They're still very heated discussions in election time.
I would imagine more so now. I can't imagine.
Oh boy. Boy. Do you remember much about field day?
Yes, I do remember field day. Yeah. I remember that was always tense, and I feel like that was with the flamingos, and I was a flamingo. I remember Cody Mamoon was a flamingo too. But Katie was a pelican, and Maggie Jameson was a pelican. It was pretty evenly divided, I think. And yeah, I remember being like heartbroken. Now looking back on it, in the grand scheme of things, I remember being heartbroken when we lost. And like, I think I did the relay with Cody. I'd be versus Maggie Jameson, and it would not be like friendship rooting, but there'd be like a tension during field day. I even think with every one of my friends where it was like the end of the world if you didn't win field day. And like, I remember like everyone would talk about flamingos versus pelicans. And I was like, oh, what am I going to be? And, and having not had siblings, gone to the day school. So I had no idea what hat sorting I would have.
I do remember vividly, in 8th grade, you were student of the month. Remember, you won student.
Yes, I was student month. Wow. And yes, I was.
You asked me to go to the luncheon with you.
Yes.
But
yes.
You were so excited because your dad was in Key West doing something.
Yeah.
He got up early and drove all the way just to be at your luncheon. And here you.
Well, that's nice to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. You
that? I do remember asking you now. Yeah. It's like when people jog it, I can be like, yes, I do. And now I can picture it as well. Because I forgot about those student of the month luncheons. Yeah. I remember that as well. Hold on, my earphones. Can you hear me still?
I can still hear you.
Great.
Well, listen, Delaney, I'm so glad to have seen you. You've never come back and visited me. Do you get to town at all?
I don't. My parents sort of moved once I went away to school, everyone kind of left, and so we haven't been back. If I do come down, I would love to see you. If I come down, it's just
give me a call.
Yes,
a lunch or dinner. You promise.
I promise you, when I come down, I will. Yeah, I would love to. I'm just not. I don't get down there. We don't even spend Thanksgiving down there anymore. I think we did when I was super young, like 15 or 16. But we're for the most part up in New York now. So, but if I make it down there,
or when this thing is over, you're going to move back to New York, or are you going to stay in LA?
I think I love California. I think having grown up in Florida, I like being outdoors. I like being near the beach. I like being able to go drive and hike and see the parks and stuff. So I think I'll stay put.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, hon. Well, listen, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
And Mrs. Close is going to just a couple minutes. She needs some information.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was so great to talk to you. And yeah, I would love to have lunch or dinner if I'm down there. I'll let you know.
And remember, way deep down in there, it's that great crime novel.
Yes, I hope so.
Keep boiling over, because it's they're an American tragedy. Okay, dear.
Thank you so much. It was so great to see you.
You too.